Liam Spencer's world was collapsing from the inside out. The vibrant, energetic man who once stood at the center of so many lives in Los Angeles was now a prisoner inside a fragile body, betrayed by his own brain. The diagnosis came without warning: an aggressive, malignant brain tumor. Inoperable. Terminal. The kind of verdict that stripped away everything: ambition, purpose, even hope. The doctors spoke in hushed tones, faces grim, offering palliative care as the only option. There was nothing more they could do. But Liam wasn't ready to let this be the end, not on anyone else's terms. He didn't want pity. He didn't want tears. Most of all, he didn't want Hope Logan, the love of his life, to spend her days grieving a ghost. He had seen what loss did to people. He had seen it hollow out strong hearts and wreck families. He refused to be that weight around her neck. So he made a choice, unimaginably painful, but in his mind, necessary. He would keep the truth from her. He would go quietly, protecting her until his very last breath. With time running out, Liam met privately with Carter Walton, a man he respected not just for his loyalty, but for his integrity. He asked him the impossible. "When I'm gone," Liam said, voice tight but eyes steady, "take care of Hope. Take care of the kids. Be there in the ways I won't be able to." Carter was stunned. "Gone? What are you talking about?" The words dropped like stones when Liam explained. "Cancer. No cure. No hope." Carter was crushed, horrified at the burden being placed on his shoulders. But Liam didn't want comfort. He wanted action. He needed to set things in motion, to make sure the people he loved would be okay after he was gone. But secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks, and eventually, Hope sensed something was wrong. Liam, always present, always open, had started pulling away. She confronted him, tears, confusion, anger. That's when everything unraveled. She learned the truth in one earth-shattering moment. Her world tilted, her breath vanished. The man she loved was dying, and she hadn't seen it coming. Word spread quickly across the community, reaching Dr. John Finnegan. Driven by both his medical instincts and a deep desire to atone for the tragedies he had already witnessed in his family, Finn stepped forward with a desperate offer. He had been working on a highly experimental surgical procedure. Unapproved, untested on humans, but maybe, just maybe, it could give Liam a chance. Finn proposed a clinical surgery that pushed the limits of medicine, a procedure so risky that other doctors wouldn't even consider it. But Liam, knowing the end was near, accepted. The preparations were rushed. Hope was torn between fear and desperate hope. Steffi Forrester, once Liam's partner and still emotionally connected to him through shared history and children, stood by, anxious and uncertain. Carter, helpless, kept vigil in silence. Everyone knew the odds. No one said it aloud. The day of the surgery arrived like a storm. In the sterile operating room, Finn led the charge, determined to save a man whose life was slipping like sand through fingers. But fate was cruel. Minutes into the delicate procedure, things spiraled out of control. Liam's body, weakened by the disease, couldn't withstand the trauma. Monitors screamed. Panic flooded the room. And then, flatline. Silence. Liam Spencer died on the operating table. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Finn was shattered. He had taken a gamble, one fueled by the need to fix what others deemed unfixable, and he had lost. The guilt consumed him. He couldn't stop replaying the surgery in his head, the critical choices, the missteps, the what-ifs. He had promised to try, but in trying, he felt he had hastened Liam's end. Hope was inconsolable. One moment, she clung to the possibility of a miracle. The next, she was left with a cold, sterile goodbye. The pain cracked through her like glass shattering, memories, promises, unfinished sentences. Her grief was raw, exposed, and uncontrollable. And Steffi's grief took a darker turn. She couldn't see the tumor, couldn't see the months Liam had been quietly withering away. All she saw was Finn, a husband who had promised to do no harm, now standing at the center of a tragedy. Her rage burned through the sorrow. She blamed him. Publicly. Loudly. She accused him of killing Liam, of reckless arrogance, of playing God with a life he had no right to gamble. Finn tried to explain, to beg for understanding, but Steffi wouldn't hear it. In her eyes, he hadn't saved Liam, he had destroyed him. What she didn't know, what almost no one fully grasped, was that Liam had always been dying. Even without the surgery, he had only weeks left. His tumor was aggressive, devouring his mind and motor functions faster than anyone could predict. The operation was a long shot, yes, but the alternative was certain death. Still, the damage was done. Finn was broken. His marriage fractured. His reputation scarred. Steffi couldn't look at him without seeing Liam's lifeless face. The man who had tried to save a life now wandered his days in a fog of guilt, questioning every decision he had made. He had stepped into the operating room as a doctor. He left it as a man haunted. As the funeral drew near, the entire community descended into mourning. Liam's death wasn't just the end of a life, it was the unraveling of so many bonds. Ridge Forrester, devastated by the loss of a man he had come to consider family. Brooke Logan, destroyed by watching her daughter collapse under the weight of widowhood. Bill Spencer, Liam's father, inconsolable with grief and driven by a need for someone to blame, someone to hold accountable for the loss of his son. And still, the truth of Liam's choice lingered quietly beneath it all. He had orchestrated his departure with the care of a man desperate to minimize damage, but he hadn't succeeded. Grief is never clean. It doesn't follow logic. Hope struggled to move forward, haunted by Liam's final days and the thought that maybe, just maybe, she could have made those last weeks better, fuller, if she'd only known sooner. Carter tried to support her, to be what Liam had asked of him, but stepping into the space of a dead man was no easy thing. Their dynamic shifted, uneasy, raw, neither of them sure how to begin again. Meanwhile, Steffi's fury festered. She saw Finn crumble under the pressure, saw his self-doubt twist into something darker. Their once solid marriage was now a battleground. Every conversation ended in blame. Every silence throbbed with things unsaid. The town of Los Angeles would never be the same. Liam's death sent shockwaves through the lives of everyone who had ever loved him, hated him, or shared even a single scene with him. His absence left a vacuum. And with that vacuum came change, messy, painful, inevitable change. Whispers began to rise. Some questioned why the surgery was even attempted. Others wondered if Liam had truly wanted to survive, or if he had chosen to gamble with Finn's hands as a final act of hope. Some blamed Hope for not realizing sooner. Some blamed Carter for not stopping the operation. Most blamed Finn. But no one blamed Liam. He had fought quietly, chosen selflessness in his final acts, tried to make peace with the impossible. And in that, he left behind a legacy not just of heartbreak, but of love in its most brutal, courageous form. Liam Spencer's death wasn't just a plot twist. It was an earthquake. And the aftershocks were only beginning. In the days following Liam's funeral, the world kept turning, but for those closest to him, time seemed frozen in grief. Hope wandered their home like a ghost, barely eating, barely speaking. Their children asked questions she couldn't answer. When's Daddy coming back? Why is everyone so sad? Each innocent question cut her deeper than the last. She held them close, but her arms felt empty. Liam had been her anchor, her stability in a world that constantly shifted beneath her. Without him, she was adrift. Carter, true to his word, stepped in. He helped where he could: school pickups, bedtime stories, even grocery runs, but there was a quiet hesitancy in every move he made. Hope could feel it. It wasn't the awkwardness of a man trying to replace someone. It was the weight of a promise. Liam had entrusted him with this impossible task, and Carter was drowning in it. Still, a subtle closeness began to form between them. Not romantic, not yet. But there was something there. Grief that mirrored grief. Pain that understood pain. And through it, a kind of survival pact. But the outside world wasn't as forgiving. Bill Spencer had been eerily quiet since his son's death. At the funeral, he stood like a statue, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. But behind closed doors, rage boiled. He wanted answers, and Finn was at the top of his list. Bill stormed into the hospital days later, demanding to know what had happened in that hour. He accused Finn of recklessness, arrogance, malpractice. "You killed my son," he spat. "And I'll make sure the world knows it." Finn didn't fight back. He couldn't. There was nothing Bill could say that he hadn't already said to himself 1,000 times. The guilt was relentless, a cancer of its own. Steffi's coldness had turned their home into a war zone. Their children tiptoed around their parents like strangers. And now his career, the one thing he thought he could cling to, was under fire. The hospital launched an internal review. Finn was suspended pending investigation. Headlines splashed his name across the news. Doctor's risky procedure ends in tragedy. Local surgeon under fire after high-profile death. The public began to turn. Former patients questioned his judgment. Colleagues kept their distance. Finn was isolated, professionally, emotionally, utterly alone. At home, Steffi couldn't look at him without seeing the flatline. The surgery haunted her dreams. "You didn't have to do it," she snapped one night. "You had no right to gamble with his life." Finn's voice was barely a whisper. He was already dying. "I don't care," she shouted. "You should have let him go with dignity." "Not like that. Not like that." The marriage cracked. The silence between them grew longer. And the love that once held them together began to wither in the shadow of grief and blame. Meanwhile, Ridge and Brooke tried to support their daughters, but even they were unraveling. Brooke was terrified for Hope, watching her daughter spiral into depression, unable to lift herself from the weight of loss. Ridge, stuck between Steffi's fury and Finn's downfall, found himself questioning everything. "How did we let this happen?" he asked one night. "How did we not see what Liam was going through?" But no one had an answer. Liam had kept the secret locked so tightly that even those closest to him hadn't seen the cracks until it was too late. Hope, increasingly fragile, began pushing people away. She refused Carter's help. She stopped answering texts. She barely left the house. Until one day, she disappeared altogether. Carter found the house empty, the kids with Brooke, no sign of Hope. She had gone to the one place she thought she might feel Liam again. The cliffs above Malibu where he once proposed, where their love felt eternal. And there she stood, barefoot on the edge, eyes glassy, hair whipping in the wind. She wasn't suicidal, but she was numb. Beyond pain, beyond thought. It was Carter who found her, breathless and terrified. He pulled her away from the edge, held her until the sobs finally came, and with them, a flicker of something else. Not healing. Not yet. But the start of it. Back in town, Finn reached his breaking point. After weeks of silence, he went to see Steffi. Not to beg. Not to explain. Just to tell the truth. "I can't keep living like this," he said. "I loved Liam too. Not the way you did. Not the way Hope did. But I respected him. And I tried to save him. I didn't kill him, Steffi. His body was already shutting down. The tumor was growing into his motor cortex. Even if he had lived through the surgery, he would have lost everything within days. Memory, speech, movement. He would have been a shell. He knew that. He chose the surgery because it gave him control. He didn't want to die in a hospital bed, helpless. He wanted a chance. And I gave it to him. Steffi broke. The anger cracked just enough to let the grief in. She collapsed into Finn's arms, sobbing, finally understanding the impossible choice he had made. It didn't fix them, but it opened the door. Elsewhere, the world kept shifting. Bill, dissatisfied with hospital investigations, hired private investigators. He wanted proof that someone had acted negligently. He wanted a target. But what he found instead was Liam's medical records, the tumor, the prognosis, the knowledge that his son had been terminal all along. The truth gutted him. The rage melted into sorrow. And for the first time since the funeral, Bill cried. Weeks passed. Then months. The town began to move forward. Slowly, unevenly. Hope, now attending grief counseling, started to reconnect with her children. She spent time with Carter. Not in romance, but in healing. She visited Liam's grave weekly, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. She started writing again. Not fashion. Not campaigns. Just journals. Letters to Liam. Words she wished she had said. Finn was reinstated, quietly. The investigation concluded that the surgery, while risky, had been consented to with full awareness. His license remained intact, but his confidence was fractured. He returned to work part-time. Not as a hero. Just a man trying to make things right. Steffi and Finn began couples therapy. Their path was uncertain, but they were trying. For their children. For themselves. And Liam, though gone, remained everywhere, in the faces of his children, in the memories that refused to fade, in the scars left behind. The town would never forget him, not because of how he died, but because of how he lived, because he loved deeply, because he fought quietly, because in the end, he made the hardest choices to protect the people he loved most. But peace is never permanent in Los Angeles. And as the next chapter loomed, secrets still lingered, letters Liam had written but never sent, decisions Carter hadn't yet faced, and the looming question of whether Hope would ever open her heart again. Because in a town built on love and betrayal, endings are only ever temporary. And the next storm is always just over the horizon.